Let us begin our journey into one of the most captivating mysteries in the history of art, a portrait that has mesmerized the world for over 5 centuries. In the year 1503, in the heart of Renaissance Florence, a story began that would echo through the ages. Leonardo da Vinci, already a master artist at the age of 51, accepted what seemed like a simple commission. A wealthy Florentine silk merchant named Francesco del Giocondo approached Leonardo with a request to paint a portrait of his young wife, Lisa Gherardini. She was 24 years old at the time, a mother, living a quiet life in the bustling streets of Florence. Neither she nor her husband could have imagined that this portrait would one day become the most famous painting in the world. Leonardo began this work during a fascinating period of his life. He had returned to Florence after years of service in Milan, and the city was alive with artistic competition and innovation. Michelangelo was there too, creating his own masterpieces. But Leonardo approached this portrait differently than other artists of his time. While most portraits were completed within months, Leonardo would carry this painting with him for years, perhaps for the rest of his life. The woman we now call Mona Lisa, her name actually comes from a gentle Italian honorific. Mona is a contraction of Madonna, meaning my lady. So when we say Mona Lisa, we're really saying Lady Lisa. Her full name, Lisa Gherardini, connects her to an old Florentine family, though not one of the city's wealthiest or most powerful. She was, in many ways, an ordinary woman of her time, which makes the extraordinary attention Leonardo paid to her portrait all the more intriguing. The painting is surprisingly small when you see it in person. It measures just 77 centimeters by 53 centimeters, about 30 inches by 21 inches. Smaller than many people imagine, intimate in scale, painted on a panel of poplar wood. Leonardo chose this modest size deliberately, creating something that feels personal, as if Lisa is sitting just across from you in a quiet room. What Leonardo created on this small wooden panel would revolutionize portraiture forever. Before the Mona Lisa, most portraits showed people in profile, turned to the side, formal and distant. Leonardo positioned Lisa in a 3/4 view, her body angled gently, her face turned toward us, her eyes meeting ours. This was relatively new at the time, and it creates something magical, a sense that she is present with us, aware of us, perhaps about to speak. And then there is her smile, that mysterious, almost imperceptible smile that has captivated viewers for centuries. Leonardo achieved this through a technique called sfumato, an Italian word meaning smoky or vanished. He applied layer upon layer of incredibly thin glazes, blurring the edges between light and shadow, especially around her mouth and eyes. This technique creates an ambiguity. When you look directly at her mouth, the smile seems to fade, but when your eyes wander to other parts of the painting, the smile appears more clearly. It's an optical dance that Leonardo orchestrated with extraordinary skill. The landscape behind Lisa is equally mysterious and dreamlike. It's not a real place that Leonardo painted from life, but rather an imaginary world, a synthesis of his observations of nature and his own creative vision. The landscape on the left side appears to be at a different elevation than the right side, creating a subtle sense of imbalance that adds to the painting's enigmatic quality. Winding paths, a distant bridge, rock formations, and water that seems to flow through an ancient, primordial world, all rendered in those soft, hazy layers that draw us deeper into the painting's atmosphere. Leonardo worked on this portrait not in a rush, but slowly, thoughtfully, returning to it again and again over years. He was known to be a perfectionist, someone who often left works unfinished because they never quite matched the vision in his mind. But with the Mona Lisa, he continued to refine, to add layers, to perfect those subtle transitions of light and shadow. Some historians believe he worked on it from 1503 until as late as 1519, the year of his death, carrying it with him as he traveled, unable or unwilling to part with it. And so this painting, begun in Florence on that wooden panel, became more than a commission. It became Leonardo's companion, a work that captured not just the likeness of Lisa Gherardini, but something deeper, something that continues to draw us in, 500 years later, as we try to understand the secret behind that gentle, knowing smile. As the years passed and Leonardo continued to refine his masterpiece, his life took unexpected turns that would shape the destiny of this small portrait. In 1516, near the end of his life, Leonardo left Italy forever. He accepted an invitation from King Francis I of France, a young monarch who deeply admired the aging master's genius. Leonardo was 64 years old, his health declining, but he made the long journey across the Alps to France, to a manor house called Clos-Luce in the Loire Valley. And with him, carefully packed among his belongings, travelled the portrait of Lisa Gherardini. King Francis I didn't just admire Leonardo, he revered him. The young king gave Leonardo the title first painter, architect, and engineer to the king, but he asked very little of the elderly artist. Instead, Francis seemed content simply to spend time in Leonardo's company, to listen to him speak about art, science, nature, and the mysteries of the world. And it was during this time in France that Leonardo continued to work on the Mona Lisa, adding final touches, perfecting those luminous glazes that made the painting seem almost alive. When Leonardo died on May 2, 1519, in that small manor house in France, the Mona Lisa remained with him until the end. According to most historical accounts, King Francis I purchased the painting after Leonardo's death, paying approximately 4,000 gold coins for it, an enormous sum at the time. And so the portrait that began as a commission for a Florentine merchant became the property of the French crown. This is why, to this day, the Mona Lisa resides in France, in the Louvre Museum, rather than in Italy where it was born. 4 centuries after Leonardo's death, the painting moved through the royal collections of France. It hung in the Palace of Fontainebleau, then in the Palace of Versailles, gracing the walls where kings and queens would pass by, perhaps pausing to wonder at that enigmatic smile. King Francis I reportedly kept it in his bathroom at Fontainebleau, not as a sign of disrespect, but because bathrooms in royal palaces were often private chambers where the king would entertain close friends and important visitors. The painting was meant to be seen, admired, contemplated in intimate settings. During the chaos of the French Revolution in the late 1700s, when royal palaces were seized and their contents catalogued as property of the new republic, the Mona Lisa found a new home. It was moved to the Louvre, which had been transformed from a royal palace into a public museum in 1793. But even then, it wasn't immediately famous to the wider public. It was admired by artists and connoisseurs, certainly, but it was just one painting among many masterpieces in the growing collection. Napoleon Bonaparte, when he became Emperor of France, was so captivated by the painting that he had it removed from the Louvre and hung in his private bedroom in the Tuileries Palace. For 4 years, from 1800 to 1804, the Mona Lisa watched over Napoleon as he slept, as he dressed, as he contemplated his empire. Imagine the portrait of a Florentine merchant's wife, keeping silent company with one of history's most powerful men. After Napoleon's fall from power, the painting returned to the Louvre, where it has remained, with few exceptions, ever since. The painting's fame grew steadily throughout the 19th century, particularly among romantic writers and artists who were fascinated by its mystery. They wrote poems about her, created stories about who she was, what she was thinking, why that smile lingered on her lips. The French poet Théophile Gautier described her as having the smile of a goddess. Writers began to project their own fantasies and interpretations onto the painting, transforming Lisa Gherardini into a symbol of feminine mystery, of secrets hidden behind a beautiful face. But it was a shocking event in the early 20th century that would catapult the Mona Lisa to unprecedented worldwide fame. On Monday, August 21, 1911, an Italian handyman named Vincenzo Perugia walked into the Louvre, removed the painting from the wall, hid it under his smock, and simply walked out with it. The Mona Lisa had been stolen. When the theft was discovered the next day, the empty space on the wall caused a sensation that rippled across the world. Newspapers everywhere published the story. The painting's disappearance made it more famous than its presence ever had. For 2 years, the Mona Lisa was missing. The empty space on the Louvre wall became a pilgrimage site. People came to see the absence, to mourn the loss of this suddenly irreplaceable masterpiece. The French poet Guillaume Apollinaire was even arrested as a suspect, though he was innocent. Pablo Picasso was questioned by police. The whole of France seemed to be in mourning for the lost portrait. Perugia, meanwhile, kept the painting hidden in a trunk in his small apartment in Paris, believing he was a patriot who was returning the painting to its rightful home in Italy. In December 1913, Perugia finally attempted to sell the painting to an art dealer in Florence, the very city where it had been created 4 centuries earlier. The dealer immediately recognized it and contacted authorities. Perugia was arrested, and the Mona Lisa was recovered. But before it returned to France, it went on a brief tour of Italy, displayed in Florence, Rome, and Milan, where enormous crowds came to see it, to celebrate its return to Italian soil, even though it would soon leave again. The painting returned to the Louvre in January 1914, and its fame was now truly global, cemented by the drama of its theft and recovery. And so the quiet portrait that Leonardo began in Florence, that travelled with him to France, that hung in royal palaces and an emperor's bedroom, had now survived theft and become something more than a painting. It had become a legend, a celebrity, a cultural icon that transcended art itself. The 20th century would test the Mona Lisa's resilience in ways that no one could have imagined. During World War II, as Nazi Germany invaded France in 1940, the curators of the Louvre faced an impossible task: how to protect the treasures of human civilization from the chaos of war. The Mona Lisa, now recognized as perhaps the museum's most precious possession, could not be allowed to fall into enemy hands. And so began a secret journey that would take the painting far from Paris, hidden in the French countryside. The painting was carefully removed from its frame and placed in a specially designed case, cushioned and protected. It was then transported to the Château d'Amboise in the Loire Valley, the very region where Leonardo had spent his final years. But as the war intensified and the danger grew, the Mona Lisa was moved again, and then again. Over the course of the war, it was relocated 6 times, hidden in various châteaux and secret locations across France. At one point, it rested in the Château de Chambord, and later in the Ingres Museum in Montauban. Each move was conducted in secrecy, with only a handful of people knowing the painting's true location. Throughout these years of hiding, the painting was accompanied by a devoted curator who never left its side. The Louvre's chief curator of paintings ensured that the Mona Lisa was kept at the proper temperature and humidity, checking on it regularly, protecting it as one would protect a living being. When the war finally ended in 1945, the painting returned to the Louvre, having survived one of the darkest chapters in human history. It emerged unscathed, that gentle smile unchanged by the violence that had raged across Europe. In the decades following the war, the Mona Lisa began to travel the world in a way it never had before, becoming an ambassador of art and culture. In 1963, the painting made its first journey to the United States, a trip that required extraordinary planning and security. It traveled aboard the ocean liner SS France, insured for $100 million, the highest insurance value ever placed on a painting at that time. The painting was secured in a specially built, waterproof case that could float in case of emergency. Even the ship's captain was given specific instructions for the precious cargo. When the Mona Lisa arrived in America, it created a sensation unlike anything the art world had ever seen. It was displayed first at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., where President John F. Kennedy and First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy hosted a special reception for its arrival. Jackie Kennedy had been instrumental in arranging for the loan, understanding the cultural significance it would hold. Over 500,000 people came to see the painting during its 3-week stay in Washington, standing in lines that stretched for hours, waiting for their brief moment in front of the legendary portrait. From Washington, the Mona Lisa traveled to New York City, where it was displayed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The crowds there were even larger. Over 1 million people viewed the painting during its month-long exhibition. People lined up in the cold winter weather, some waiting 5 or 6 hours for a glimpse that might last only a few seconds as they were ushered past the painting. The New York Times described the phenomenon as Mona Lisa mania. The painting had become not just art, but a pilgrimage site, something people needed to see with their own eyes to believe was real. The painting's physical condition has been carefully monitored and preserved throughout the centuries. Beneath Leonardo's masterful layers of paint lies a complex support structure. The original poplar wood panel has developed a significant crack over the centuries, running vertically through the painting. To prevent further damage, restorers added wooden crosspieces to the back of the panel in the 18th century, essentially bracing it to keep it stable. This intervention has been crucial in preserving the painting's integrity, allowing it to survive for more than 500 years. The painting has never undergone a major restoration or cleaning in modern times. The Louvre's conservators have made the deliberate choice to leave it essentially as it is, with all its age and history visible. The varnish that Leonardo applied has yellowed over the centuries, giving the painting a warm, golden tone that differs from how it would have appeared when freshly painted. Some art historians believe that if the varnish were removed, we would see brighter colors, perhaps a blue sky instead of the hazy, amber atmosphere we see today. But the decision has been made to preserve the painting's history, its age, rather than attempt to restore it to an imagined original state. The frame that surrounds the Mona Lisa today is not Leonardo's original frame, nor is it even particularly old. The current frame was designed and installed in the 1950s, a relatively simple, classical design meant to complement the painting without overwhelming it. The original frame, if Leonardo even created one specifically for this painting, has been lost to history. Over the centuries, the painting has been reframed multiple times, each era choosing a style that reflected contemporary tastes. Behind the painting, on the back of the wooden panel, there are barely visible marks and numbers, cataloguing information added by various owners and curators over the centuries. These marks tell their own story, the journey of the painting through different collections, different hands, different moments in history. They're like whispers from the past, invisible to the millions who stand before the painting, but present nonetheless, recording the passage of time. The protective glass that shields the Mona Lisa today is not ordinary glass. It's bulletproof, climate-controlled glass, installed after several incidents in the 20th century proved that the painting needed extraordinary protection. The glass maintains a perfect microenvironment for the painting, regulating temperature and humidity, filtering harmful light, while still allowing millions of visitors each year to see Lisa's face, her hands folded gently, her mysterious smile offering the same quiet enigma it offered to Leonardo himself over 500 years ago. And so the painting continues its existence, protected and preserved, a bridge between Leonardo's Renaissance world and our modern age, carrying within its thin layers of paint and with the accumulated wonder of all who have stood before it. The room where the Mona Lisa hangs today is unlike any other gallery in the Louvre. The Salle des Etats, the States Room, was renovated specifically to accommodate the millions of visitors who come each year to see this single painting. The room is vast, with soaring ceilings and walls lined with other masterpieces, enormous paintings by Venetian masters like Veronese and Tintoretto. Yet despite the grandeur surrounding it, every eye in the room turns toward one small panel on the wall, enclosed in its protective case, lit by carefully calibrated lighting that reveals every subtle gradation of Leonardo's sfumato technique. Approximately 10 million people visit the Mona Lisa each year, making it the most visited work of art in the world. On busy days, as many as 30,000 people might pass through the Salle des Etats, each hoping for their moment with the painting. The average viewing time is remarkably brief. Most visitors spend only about 15 seconds looking at the actual painting, often focused on capturing a photograph rather than experiencing the work itself. Museum guards gently move the crowds along, creating a constant flow of humanity, a river of people from every corner of the earth, all drawn to this single face. The painting hangs at a precise height on the wall, positioned so that Lisa's eyes are approximately at the average viewer's eye level. This placement is intentional, creating that famous effect where her eyes seem to follow you no matter where you stand in the room. It's an optical phenomenon that Leonardo understood intuitively. The way a face painted in three-quarter view, with the eyes looking directly outward, creates the illusion of connection, of being watched, of being seen by the subject of the portrait. Leonardo's understanding of human anatomy contributed profoundly to the lifelike quality of the Mona Lisa. He had spent years dissecting human cadavers, studying the structure of muscles, bones, and tissues beneath the skin. This knowledge informed every aspect of his painting, the subtle modeling of Lisa's face, the way light plays across her forehead and cheeks, the delicate rendering of her hands. Her hands, folded one over the other in the foreground, are painted with such precision that you can almost feel their softness, see the warmth of living flesh beneath the surface. Interestingly, if you look closely at the Mona Lisa's face, you'll notice she has no eyebrows or eyelashes. Art historians have debated whether Leonardo originally painted them and they faded over time, or whether their absence was intentional. High-resolution scans of the painting conducted in recent years suggest that Leonardo may have initially included very fine eyebrows, but that they've disappeared over the centuries, lost to the effects of time or possibly removed during early cleaning attempts. In Renaissance Florence, it was actually fashionable for women to pluck their eyebrows and eyelashes, so their absence might have been considered a sign of elegance and beauty. The landscape behind Lisa continues to puzzle and fascinate scholars. Unlike many Renaissance portraits that showed recognizable locations, Leonardo's background appears to be entirely imaginary, a dreamscape of his own creation. Yet some researchers have attempted to identify real locations that might have inspired elements of the scene. The winding path and distant bridge have been compared to locations in Tuscany, to places Leonardo might have seen during his travels. But the consensus remains that this is a landscape of the mind, a poetic vision rather than a topographical record. Within that mysterious background, there's a curious detail that adds to the painting's sense of otherworldliness. If you draw an imaginary horizontal line across the painting at the level of Lisa's eyes, you'll notice that the landscape on the left side appears to be at a higher elevation than the landscape on the right. The horizon line doesn't quite match. This subtle asymmetry creates a gentle tension, an almost imperceptible sense of imbalance that makes the painting feel dynamic rather than static. It's as if we're seeing two slightly different moments or perspectives merged into one image. Leonardo's technique of building up incredibly thin layers of paint created a depth and luminosity that was revolutionary. He applied the paint in glazes so thin that some layers are only 1 or 2 micrometers thick, thinner than a human hair. He might have used his fingers as much as his brushes, blending the paint directly on the panel to achieve those impossibly smooth transitions. Modern analysis has revealed that in some areas of the painting, there are more than 30 layers of these ultra-thin glazes, each one modifying the color and light of the layers beneath it, creating a visual complexity that draws the eye deeper and deeper into the image. The painting's small size, which surprises so many first-time viewers, was actually typical for portraits of the time. What makes the Mona Lisa exceptional isn't its dimensions, but rather the monumental quality Leonardo achieved within those modest boundaries. He created a sense of space, depth, and presence that makes the painting feel much larger than it actually is. It's an intimate work that somehow contains multitudes, a universe within a frame. Leonardo's choice to paint on wood rather than canvas was standard practice in early 16th century Italy. Canvas was beginning to gain popularity, especially in Venice, but Florentine painters still preferred the smooth, stable surface of prepared wooden panels. The poplar wood Leonardo chose was prized for its fine grain and stability. He would have prepared the surface himself, or supervised its preparation, applying layers of gesso, a mixture of chalk and glue, to create a perfectly smooth white ground on which to build his painting. Every aspect of the process was considered, deliberate, part of the meticulous craft that defined Leonardo's approach to his art. And so, layer by microscopic layer, day by patient day, Leonardo had built not just an image, but a presence, something that would continue to breathe, to watch, to exist across the centuries, outliving empires and epochs, surviving theft and war, becoming something more enduring than St. The painting has not always been safe from those who wished to harm it. Over the years, the Mona Lisa has survived several attacks, each one adding to its remarkable story of resilience. In 1956, the painting faced 2 separate incidents within months of each other. First, someone threw acid at the lower portion of the painting, damaging the area around Lisa's elbow. Then, just a few months later, a young Bolivian man threw a rock at the painting while it was on display. The rock shattered the glass protecting it and dislodged a speck of pigment near Lisa's left elbow. These incidents led to the installation of the bulletproof glass that protects the painting today. More recently, in 2009, a Russian woman threw a ceramic teacup at the painting, reportedly upset because she had been denied French citizenship. The teacup shattered against the protective glass, which held firm, and the painting remained unharmed. The glass, the barriers, the constant surveillance, all of these measures exist because the Mona Lisa has become something more than art. It has become a symbol, and symbols attract both devotion and destruction. The monetary value of the Mona Lisa is essentially incalculable. It is considered priceless, not in a poetic sense, but in a literal one. There is no amount of money for which France would sell it, and no insurance company could possibly assess its true value. When it traveled to the United States in 1963, it was insured for $100 million, which adjusted for inflation would be nearly $1 billion today. But even that figure feels inadequate for a painting that draws millions of visitors who contribute hundreds of millions of dollars to the French economy each year. Leonardo's notebooks, filled with thousands of pages of observations, inventions, and sketches, contain almost no mention of the Mona Lisa. For a painting he worked on for so many years, carried with him across countries, and apparently never delivered to its commissioner, the silence in his writings is profound. He mentions other works, describes other projects, but about this portrait, he wrote almost nothing. It's as if the painting existed in a private space in his mind, separate from the scientific and technical work he documented so meticulously. The identity of the woman in the painting, while now generally accepted to be Lisa Gherardini, was debated for centuries. Various theories proposed that she was Leonardo's mother, or a self-portrait of Leonardo in feminine form, or Isabella d'Este, a powerful noblewoman, or even Cecilia Gallerani, another of Leonardo's portrait subjects. The mystery of her identity became part of the painting's allure. It wasn't until 2005 that a note was discovered in the margin of a book, written by a Florentine official in 1503, confirming that Leonardo was indeed working on a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. The painting is sometimes called La Gioconda in Italian, or La Joconde in French. These names come from Lisa's married name, Gherardini del Giocondo. But there's a beautiful wordplay embedded in this title. Gioconda in Italian also means joyful or playful, which seems to perfectly capture that enigmatic smile. Leonardo, who loved riddles and wordplay, would certainly have appreciated this double meaning. A portrait of a woman whose very name suggests the playful mystery of her expression. The colors we see in the Mona Lisa today are not quite the colors Leonardo originally applied. Beyond the yellowing of the varnish, the pigments themselves have changed over time. The blue pigments made from lapis lazuli that Leonardo used in the sky and in parts of Lisa's dress have faded considerably. Scientific analysis suggests that the sky behind her was once a brighter, clearer blue, and that her dress may have had more vibrant blue tones. Time has transformed the painting, mellowing its colors, giving it that warm, golden quality that feels ancient and mysterious. Leonardo pioneered a painting technique that made the Mona Lisa possible. He mixed his pigments with oil rather than the tempera that was more common in earlier Italian painting. Oil paint dries much more slowly than tempera, which gave Leonardo the time he needed to blend colors seamlessly on the panel, creating those soft transitions that define the sfumato technique. This slow drying time meant he could work on a single area for hours, building up thin layers, adjusting, perfecting. It also meant the painting took years rather than months to complete, as each layer needed time to dry before the next could be applied. The Mona Lisa has inspired countless copies and reproductions over the centuries. Even during Leonardo's lifetime, his students and followers attempted to copy the painting, trying to capture its magic. Some of these early copies still exist in museums around the world. One version, called the Proto Mona Lisa, was painted by one of Leonardo's students working alongside the master, using the same model and setting up an easel right next to Leonardo's. This copy shows us what the painting might have looked like with brighter, less aged colors, and it has helped scholars understand Leonardo's original intentions. The background of the painting contains no signs of human civilization except for that single, distant bridge. There are no buildings, no people, no roads other than the winding paths through the landscape. This absence creates a timeless quality. The scene could be from the distant past or the far future. It removes Lisa from any specific time or place, making her existence purely in the realm of art, in the eternal present of the image. She sits before us not as a woman of Florence in 1503, but as something universal, something that exists outside of time. And so the painting remains, absorbing light, reflecting it back through those thin layers of ancient pigment, presenting to each new generation the same quiet figure, the same folded hands, the same mysterious expression that has outlived the woman who wore it, the artist who captured it, and all those who have stood before it in wonder. In the Louvre's climate-controlled chamber, the temperature around the Mona Lisa is maintained at a constant 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, with humidity levels kept between 50 and 55%. These precise conditions are not arbitrary. They represent the optimal environment for preserving the aged wood panel and the delicate layers of paint. Any significant fluctuation could cause the wood to expand or contract, potentially worsening the crack that already runs through it, or causing the paint to separate from its surface. The painting exists in its own microclimate, a carefully maintained bubble of perfect atmospheric conditions. The lighting that illuminates the Mona Lisa is equally controlled and deliberate. The painting is lit with LED lights that emit no ultraviolet radiation, which would gradually fade the pigments and damage the varnish. The light level is kept relatively low, around 50 lux, which is dim compared to typical room lighting but necessary for preservation. This dimness adds to the painting's mystique. Lisa emerges from shadows, her face glowing softly, as if lit by candlelight in some distant Renaissance chamber. Leonardo was not just a painter but a true Renaissance polymath, a scientist, engineer, anatomist, mathematician, and inventor. His curiosity extended to every aspect of the natural world, and this breadth of knowledge infused his art. When he painted the Mona Lisa, he brought to bear his understanding of geology in the rock formations of the background, his knowledge of hydraulics in the way water flows through the landscape, his study of optics in the way light behaves on skin and fabric. The painting is not just a portrait but a synthesis of everything Leonardo understood about the visible world. The technique Leonardo used to create Lisa's enigmatic smile involves painting the corners of her mouth and eyes in shadow, using his sfumato method to blur the edges where these features meet the surrounding skin. When we look directly at her mouth, we see it clearly, and the smile seems subtle or nearly absent. But when our eyes focus on another part of the painting, our peripheral vision registers the shadows around her mouth differently, and suddenly the smile appears more pronounced. It's a trick of perception, a game Leonardo plays with our eyes and brain, exploiting the way we process visual information. Modern scientific analysis using infrared reflectography has revealed secrets hidden beneath the surface of the Mona Lisa. Researchers have discovered that Leonardo made numerous changes as he worked, adjusting the position of Lisa's fingers, modifying the placement of her head, refining the folds of her dress. These pentimenti, as they're called, these traces of the artist's decision-making process, show us that even Leonardo, the master, worked through trial and error, constantly revising and perfecting his vision. Beneath the visible layers of paint, infrared imaging has also revealed an underdrawing, preliminary sketches Leonardo made directly on the prepared panel before he began painting. These sketches show that he carefully planned the composition, mapping out the basic forms and proportions. But interestingly, the final painting deviates from this underdrawing in subtle ways, showing how Leonardo continued to evolve his concept even as he painted, refusing to be bound by his initial plan. The Mona Lisa has become one of the most reproduced and parodied images in human history. From Andy Warhol's silkscreened versions to Marcel Duchamp's edition of a mustache and goatee in his famous piece Au Cul, artists have used the painting as a canvas for their own commentary. It appears on coffee mugs and t-shirts, in advertisements and cartoons, in high art and popular culture. This ubiquity is a testament to the painting's iconic status, but it also creates a strange phenomenon. Many people feel they know the painting intimately before they've ever seen the original. The wood panel on which the Mona Lisa is painted was cut from a single tree. Dendrochronology, the science of dating wood by analyzing tree rings, has been used to study the panel. While the exact year the tree was cut down hasn't been definitively determined, scientists believe the wood dates from sometime in the late 1400s, consistent with Leonardo beginning the painting in the early 1500s. The tree that became the Mona Lisa grew in the forests of Italy, absorbing sunlight and rain, having no knowledge that centuries later, it would be one of the most carefully preserved and protected objects on Earth. Lisa Gherardini, the woman who sat for this portrait, lived a long life by Renaissance standards. She was born in 1479 and died in 1542, reaching the age of 63. She spent most of her life in Florence, raised 5 children, and by all accounts lived a relatively ordinary existence for a woman of her social class. She never knew that Leonardo had immortalized her. She never saw the painting become famous. She died 23 years after Leonardo, in the same city where the portrait began, unaware that her face would become the most recognizable in the history of art. After Lisa's death, after Leonardo's death, after the painting had passed into the collection of French kings, the real woman faded into obscurity. For centuries, no one knew who she was. The painting became simply the Mona Lisa, a beautiful mystery. It wasn't until modern scholarship, careful detective work through Renaissance records and documents, that Lisa Gherardini emerged from the shadows of history. In a way, Leonardo gave her a kind of immortality that transcended her actual life. Her image outlived her memory, existing independently, until finally, the woman and the portrait were reunited in understanding. And so across the centuries, across the distance between Florence and Paris, between Renaissance and modern age, between the living woman and the painted image, a connection persists, fragile as those thin layers of pigment, yet somehow unbreakable, enduring through time like a whisper that never quite fades away. The room where Leonardo painted the Mona Lisa no longer exists, at least not as he knew it. He likely worked in various locations as he created the portrait, perhaps beginning in his Florence workshop, continuing in Milan, and finally in France. We can imagine him in a room with north-facing windows, the preferred light for painters because it's steady and cool, without the harsh contrasts of direct sunlight. He would have worked standing at his easel, or perhaps sitting, the small wooden panel propped before him, mixing his pigments on a palette, building the image stroke by patient stroke, layer by transparent layer. The pigments Leonardo used were ground by hand from minerals, plants, and other natural sources. The deep blacks came from charcoal or lampblack, soot collected from oil lamps. The warm earth tones of the landscape were made from ochres and umbers, iron-rich clays found in the earth. The precious ultramarine blue, made from ground lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan, was one of the most expensive pigments available, more costly than gold. Every color on the palette represented not just an aesthetic choice, but hours of preparation, grinding stones into powder, mixing them with linseed oil to create paint. Lisa's dress in the painting appears to be a deep golden brown color, but this was not necessarily its original appearance. Scientific analysis suggests that the dress may have contained more vibrant colors when freshly painted, including blues and greens that have faded or been obscured by darkened varnish. What we see now is the painting transformed by time, chemistry, and the slow dance between pigment, oil, and air that has been occurring for over 5 centuries. The pose Leonardo chose for Lisa was carefully calculated to convey both dignity and intimacy. Her body is angled slightly to one side in a classical contrapposto position, while her face turns toward us. Her left arm rests on the arm of a chair, barely visible in the painting, while her right hand gently holds her left wrist. This arrangement of the hands, one resting on the other, creates a sense of composure and self-possession. It's a gesture that suggests patience, calm, someone comfortable in their own presence. If you look very carefully at the Mona Lisa's hands, you can see the delicate modeling that shows Leonardo's mastery of anatomy. The soft transitions between light and shadow on her fingers, the subtle indication of bones and tendons beneath the skin, the way her hand curves naturally. These details reveal the countless hours Leonardo spent studying human cadavers, understanding exactly how the body is constructed. This knowledge transformed his painting from mere imitation into something that feels genuinely alive. The painting's fame has made it a target not just for vandals, but for passionate admirers whose devotion borders on obsession. In 1956, the same year the painting was attacked, a man fell so deeply in love with the Mona Lisa that he sent it love letters and visited it repeatedly, standing before it for hours. Throughout the decades, numerous visitors have reported feeling an intense emotional connection to the painting, some moved to tears, others feeling as though Lisa were actually communicating with them across the centuries. This phenomenon speaks to Leonardo's genius. He created not just an image, but a presence that continues to evoke powerful emotional responses. The Mona Lisa has traveled outside France only a handful of times since returning after World War II. In 1974, it traveled to Tokyo and Moscow, where millions more people lined up to see it. These international exhibitions require extraordinary planning. The painting must be transported in a specially designed, climate-controlled case, accompanied by curators and conservators who monitor its condition constantly. The insurance, security, and logistics of moving the painting make such trips increasingly rare. Today, the Louvre is reluctant to lend it at all, considering it too fragile and too precious to risk. Leonardo's choice to leave the painting unfinished in certain areas adds to its dreamlike quality. If you look at the edges of the painting, particularly around Lisa's hair and the distant landscape, you can see areas where the paint is thinner, where the underpainting shows through, where Leonardo never added the final layers of detail. Some art historians argue that Leonardo never truly considered any of his works finished, that he was perpetually refining, perpetually seeking an impossible perfection. The Mona Lisa may simply be the most famous of his unfinished masterpieces. The Louvre employs a full-time team dedicated solely to monitoring and maintaining the conditions around the Mona Lisa. These conservators check the painting regularly for any signs of deterioration, monitor the climate control systems, and analyze data from sensors that measure temperature, humidity, and light levels continuously. They are the silent guardians of Leonardo's legacy, ensuring that each day the painting survives is not left to chance but is the result of careful, scientific preservation. In Leonardo's time, portraits were typically commissioned to commemorate specific events, marriages, births, political alliances. But the Mona Lisa seems to exist outside these social functions. There's no clear indication of what occasion prompted Francesco del Giocondo to commission his wife's portrait, and the fact that Leonardo never delivered it suggests he had transcended the original purpose. The painting became something more personal to Leonardo, a vehicle for exploring his ideas about beauty, nature, and the mysteries of human expression. And so the painting persists in its controlled environment, neither fully finished nor truly abandoned, existing in that liminal space between completion and possibility, watched over by those who understand that they are not merely preserving paint and wood, but safeguarding a connection to a mind that saw the world with extraordinary clarity. The barrier that keeps visitors at a distance from the Mona Lisa serves a practical purpose, but it also creates an interesting psychological effect. Most people view the painting from about 15 feet away, a distance that paradoxically allows Leonardo's technique to work its magic most effectively. From this distance, the individual brushstrokes disappear, the layers of glaze merge into a seamless whole, and Lisa's face achieves that living quality that Leonardo sought. If we could stand directly in front of it, inches from the surface, we would see the mechanics of paint and technique. But from across the room, we see only the illusion, the miracle of art. The painting's dimensions, 77 centimeters by 53 centimeters, conform to mathematical proportions that Leonardo found in nature and believed represented ideal beauty. Leonardo was deeply influenced by the classical concept of the golden ratio, a mathematical proportion found in shells, flowers, and the human body. While scholars debate whether he consciously applied this ratio to the Mona Lisa, the painting's pleasing proportions and harmonious composition suggest his intuitive understanding of mathematical beauty informed every aspect of its design. In Leonardo's notebooks, among his thousands of pages of observations and sketches, there are studies of human lips and eyes that reveal his obsession with capturing subtle expressions. He wrote about how a smile begins not in the mouth but in the eyes, how genuine emotion manifests in minute changes around the face. These studies were not for the Mona Lisa specifically, but they represent the foundation of knowledge he drew upon when painting Lisa's enigmatic expression. Every curve, every shadow, was informed by years of careful observation. The veil that Lisa wears, barely visible in the painting, draped over her hair and falling over her shoulders, was a common accessory for married women in Renaissance Florence. It's so subtly painted, so perfectly integrated into the overall composition, that many viewers don't notice it at all. But it's there, rendered with Leonardo's characteristic attention to how fabric drapes, how light passes through semi-transparent material, how even the smallest details contribute to the painting's sense of reality. Leonardo was famously slow in completing his commissions, much to the frustration of his patrons. He would become distracted by scientific investigations, by experiments with new techniques, by other projects that captured his restless curiosity. The Mona Lisa represents this tendency in its purest form, a work that consumed years of his life, that he carried with him from city to city, that he could never quite finish or could never quite bring himself to deliver. Perhaps he knew that once it left his hands, it would cease to be his, and he was not ready for that separation. The trees and vegetation in the background of the painting are painted with such attention to natural detail that botanists have attempted to identify the specific species Leonardo depicted. While the landscape is imaginary, the individual elements, the way branches grow, the shape of leaves, the texture of bark, reflect Leonardo's keen observation of the natural world. He didn't just paint generic trees, he painted trees as they actually grow, with all their organic irregularity and beauty. In the 19th century, as photography began to spread and the Mona Lisa's fame grew, countless photographers made copies of the painting. These early photographs, despite their primitive quality, helped spread the image around the world. People who would never visit Paris, who would never see the original, could now have a small reproduction on their walls. This democratization of the image was unprecedented. Suddenly, the Mona Lisa belonged not just to kings and museum visitors, but to anyone who wanted to know her. The painting has been described in countless ways over the centuries: mysterious, serene, melancholic, knowing, gentle, powerful. What's remarkable is how it seems to accommodate all these interpretations simultaneously. Different viewers see different emotions in Lisa's face, and the same viewer might see different things on different days. Leonardo created an image of such subtlety that it acts almost like a mirror, reflecting back something of what we bring to it, while always maintaining its own ineffable presence. During the Renaissance, it was common for artists to include symbolic elements in portraits: flowers representing virtues, animals suggesting character traits, objects indicating social status. But the Mona Lisa is remarkably free of obvious symbolism. There are no flowers in her hands, no jewels at her throat, no books or musical instruments to suggest her refinements. She is presented almost naked of ornament, defined not by objects but by Leonardo's rendering of her presence, her expression, the mysterious landscape that surrounds her. This simplicity is part of what makes the painting timeless. The scientific examination of the Mona Lisa using modern technology continues to reveal new information. In 2004 and 2005, researchers using high-resolution scanning discovered tiny letters and numbers hidden in Lisa's eyes, visible only under magnification. These markings, possibly Leonardo's initials or codes, have sparked new debates about hidden meanings in the painting. Whether they're intentional clues from Leonardo or simply artifacts of the painting process remains uncertain, adding yet another layer of mystery to an already enigmatic work. And so the mysteries multiply rather than resolve, each new discovery opening new questions, each technological advance revealing details that Leonardo hid in plain sight, details that have been there all along, waiting patiently for centuries to be noticed, understood, or perhaps simply to deepen the wonder that draws us back again and again. The Mona Lisa's influence on art cannot be overstated. After Leonardo created this portrait, the way artists approached portraiture fundamentally changed. The three-quarter pose, the atmospheric background, the psychological depth, these became aspirations for generations of painters. Raphael, who saw Leonardo's work in Florence, immediately adopted similar techniques in his own portraits. Rembrandt, centuries later, studied the interplay of light and shadow that Leonardo pioneered. The ripples of Leonardo's innovation spread across time, touching artists who never met him, who lived in different centuries, yet felt the power of what he had achieved. The question of why Leonardo never delivered the painting to Francesco del Giocondo has puzzled historians for generations. Perhaps the merchant could not afford Leonardo's asking price by the time the work progressed. Perhaps Leonardo became too attached to his creation. Or perhaps, most intriguingly, Leonardo recognized that he had created something that transcended the original commission, something too important, too personal, to simply hand over for payment. Whatever the reason, his decision to keep the painting changed the course of art history. In the quiet halls of the Louvre, before the museum opens to the public each morning, there is a moment when the Mona Lisa hangs in silence. No crowds, no cameras, no voices echoing off the walls. In that stillness, the painting exists much as it did in Leonardo's studio, a solitary object in space, waiting to be seen. The museum guards who see it in these moments, day after day, year after year, often speak of never tiring of it, of always finding something new in that familiar face. The painting has become more than a work of art, it has become a cultural touchstone, a reference point that transcends national boundaries and historical periods. When we speak of something as enigmatic or mysterious, we might invoke the Mona Lisa. The phrase Mona Lisa smile has entered common language, understood across cultures as shorthand for an expression that reveals and conceals simultaneously. Leonardo created not just a painting, but a metaphor that continues to resonate in human consciousness. Leonardo was 67 years old when he died in France, far from the Florence of his youth. According to legend, he died in the arms of King Francis I, though historians doubt the accuracy of this romantic tale. What we know for certain is that he died in his small manor house at Clos-Luce on a spring day in 1519, and that the Mona Lisa was there with him. It was among his final possessions, one of the few paintings he had completed, or nearly completed, during his extraordinary life. The wood panel, now over 500 years old, has been subjected to X-ray analysis, infrared scanning, and countless other scientific examinations. These studies reveal that beneath the visible surface, there are traces of Leonardo's process, areas where he changed his mind, where he adjusted proportions, where he experimented. The painting is not a single, perfect vision executed flawlessly, but rather a record of decisions, revisions, and refinements. It's a conversation Leonardo had with himself over many years, frozen in layers of pigment and oil. Today, the painting generates more than just cultural value for France, it brings substantial economic benefit. Tourism to the Louvre is driven in large part by visitors who come specifically to see the Mona Lisa. Estimates suggest that the painting contributes hundreds of millions of euros to the French economy each year through museum attendance, tourism, and related commerce. In a very real sense, Leonardo's portrait of a Florentine merchant's wife has become one of France's most valuable assets, worth far more than any amount of money it could be sold for. The painting has survived not just attacks and theft, but the simple passage of time, 5 centuries of temperature changes, humidity fluctuations, the slow degradation that affects all organic materials. That it exists at all, still recognizable, still beautiful, is a testament to both Leonardo's technical mastery and the careful stewardship of generations of conservators. Every crack, every darkened spot, every imperfection tells part of the story of its survival. In recent years, debates have emerged about whether the painting should remain at the Louvre or return to Italy. Italian officials have occasionally requested its loan for exhibitions, viewing it as part of Italy's cultural heritage since Leonardo was Italian and the painting depicts an Italian woman. France, understandably, considers it French patrimony, acquired legally centuries ago and now integral to French cultural identity. The painting, silent as always, rests at the center of these competing claims, belonging to everyone and no one. And perhaps that is the final truth about the Mona Lisa. It has transcended ownership. Though it hangs in the Louvre, though France maintains legal possession, the painting belongs to humanity. It belongs to the millions who have stood before it, to the artists it has inspired, to the writers and poets who have tried to capture its essence in words, to anyone who has ever wondered about the mystery of that smile. Leonardo painted a portrait of one woman, but created something universal, a window into the Renaissance mind, a mirror of our own curiosity, a reminder that art can bridge the vast distances of time. And so we leave the Mona Lisa as we found her, sitting quietly in her frame, hands folded, that subtle smile playing at the corners of her mouth, surrounded by her dreamlike landscape of rocks and water and winding paths. She has watched empires rise and fall, has survived theft and war and the slow erosion of centuries. She has been praised and parodied, protected and attacked, analyzed and adored. Through it all, she remains, a woman who sat for a portrait 500 years ago, captured by an artist of incomparable genius, transformed into something eternal. The pigments Leonardo mixed by hand, the wood he prepared with such care, the countless hours of patient work, all of it has culminated in this moment, and this moment, and this moment, repeating endlessly, as long as there are eyes to see and hearts to wonder. The Mona Lisa continues her silent vigil, as she has for centuries, as she will for centuries more, offering no answers, only questions, only that enigmatic expression that seems to say, perhaps the mystery itself is the meaning. Perhaps Leonardo knew that the questions we cannot answer are the ones that matter most. And with that thought, we can rest, knowing that tomorrow, and all the tomorrows that follow, she will still be there, waiting patiently in her frame, ready to be discovered anew by each person who seeks her out, ready to inspire the same wonder she inspired when Leonardo first stepped back from his easel, looked at what he had created, and saw not just paint on wood, but something alive, something that would outlive them both. Good night, Lisa Gherardini. Good night, Leonardo. Good night to all who have loved this painting, and good night to you, dear listener, as you drift into dreams, perhaps of Renaissance Florence, of mysterious smiles, of art that endures, of beauty that never fades.